So, getting straight into today, ladies and gentlemen, kicking off 2026 with a bang. What seems to be, or many people have said it is anyway, the annexation of Venezuela, and seemingly turning Venezuela into the 51st state. Nicolas Maduro has been captured by the US forces in a raid that, fun fact, actually seemed to last less time than Will's coming out speech in, one of the final episodes of Stranger Things. Which again, there's been a lot of online discourse about that recently, the kind of propagandizing and particularly the girl bossing and other things as well. Seem to have ground on a lot of people's gears, and me not being a fan of the show by any means. I have watched it, but not being a fan of the show. I get easily invested in things when they're on the TV, so I'll be on the settee doing my editing or whatever it is, and I find myself getting really distracted easily by things, and then I get invested in it. Happened all the time when, I'd be talking with my mom in the kitchen, for example, when I used to live at my mom and dad's house, and she'd be watching something which I had no interest in, and I would get very easily invested in it just from standing there and trying to talk to her, and then getting, asking her, oh, what's this about then? And next thing you know, I'm there like with popcorn and all sorts of things. Not stuff that I would do in my regular time. But the final episode, even the people who I know are quite big fans of the show are a bit puzzled and disappointed and conflicted, to say the least. However, it took less time to extract a Venezuelan dictator than it did for Will to come out as gay to his group of friends, which I thought was very, very interesting. This has been one of the memes that has been circulating around. I'll just bring the image up on screen in a moment. So the claim in this meme, for example, is that Will's coming out scene, which didn't they have to film like many times? I can't remember, I've heard how many times they actually had to film it. So apparently that lasted about 6 minutes and 51 seconds, and it took, I believe it was Delta Force, 6 minutes and 34 seconds to go in, do what they had to do, and then extract forcibly a dictator of Venezuela, or the dictator of Venezuela. And people have had a lot of different reactions to this, as you can imagine. Completely understandable. It does seem to be going against Trump's sort of MO, if you will, of no new conflicts, no new wars. It does seem, however, that some have seemed to have come out on the side of Maduro's. People who I've seen commenting on it in Britain and other places as well, which I've thought was quite puzzling. Some of the reactions I think have been very puzzling, as we'll get on to in a moment. But to say that the citizens of Venezuela, at least seemingly for the most part, are not happy about what's happened, I think is very, very disingenuous. A lot of the lefties that are claiming that it's reckless and it's going to embolden Russia and China and all of these places. The one takeaway that I think we can take away in Britain, first off, saying that why the hell do we care? Other than how this affects Britain and dealing with the problems that we have in Britain at home, why do we care? Right. Now, again, not to say that everything happens in a vacuum, right? Things happen on the other side of the world. They absolutely do have effects on us. So we should care about it as it pertains to us. Right. But a lot of people, again, whenever something happens overseas, whenever Trump does anything or whatever, they will then use that as reason to deflect the conversation away from what's going on at home in Britain, which cannot allow to happen. And the other thing, really, that people forget, that force doctrine and that things written down on paper in international law and by these bureaucrats and court officials and all of these things are, or really mean nothing without the ability to enforce them. And who has the ability to enforce said rules, and really who has the power in the dynamic to then force their will on others? Well, that's really what matters. That's why strength, right? Strength is a virtue. It's good to be strong, right? You need to be strong so you can protect the weak. For example, you can't be weak and then protect the weak. And yes, by definition, the coward is capable of the greatest courage, right? But being weak in and of itself is not a virtue, right? You hear the phrase, it's better to be a warrior in a garden than be a gardener in a war, right? You can just do things, right? So when we're talking about issues that we have in Britain, right, there's immigration and all the other things that immigration are inextricably tied in with, demographics, culture, ethnic makeup, even just the question of what a British person is, public services, health services, education, economics, things. I don't know if I said economics twice there. All of these things are inextricably entwined together with immigration and the makeup of the country, the people. It's a reminder when we're told, for example, that, oh, you can't do anything, like in the Andrew Gold interview with Steve Laws, oh, you can't do anything with immigration, let it go, you're living in the past. No, you can just do things. No, you can just do things. Doesn't mean that might makes right. That's a distinction. Doesn't mean that might makes right. But point being is that people saying, oh, it's not going to happen, you're living in the past, all of this stuff. No. You can't just do things. That's one thing that Trump did prove, is that if you want to do something, you can just do it. It matters that you have the capacity to do it and the strength to do it, right? The enforcement arm, so to speak. So, let's have a look at some of the scenes that have been coming out, not just recently from Venezuela, but it's important to have a look over the course of what's been going on in Venezuela and other areas around the world, protesting against socialism. And that's why you're seeing a lot of the reactions from the Venezuelan people. They're not exactly mad about this, right? And it's weird to see then a lot of people in other countries outside of Venezuela, particularly the lefties and stuff like that, that are absolutely losing their shit over this because Trump has done something which seemingly may work out for the better in the end, right? I don't think he purely had the interest of the Venezuelans at heart, right? I think it has more so to do with the Maduro's, involvement with organizations like Tren de Aragua, right? The Venezuelan terror group that was, I believe there was a block of apartments in Colorado, I believe it was, that was in the news cycle a good few months ago, possibly last year. They had Tren de Aragua gangsters with guns that were basically terrorizing this, it might have been a condo block or whatever they have in America in Colorado, I think it was. It might have been Charlotte. I can't remember the exact place, but it was in the news cycle around that time a good few months, if not years ago, before Trump was in office, I believe. A lot of the prominent American political commentators were talking about it. There's also the oil, right? Venezuela being a very oil-rich country. I think it's more so, again, American self-interest and maybe, again, trying to show that America is the big dick on the world stage. For example, whether you think that's a good thing or a bad thing, that can be debated. I'm not really commenting on that. But I don't think Trump necessarily had the greatest interest of the Venezuelans at heart. I don't think he was doing this because he's purely benevolent with the Venezuelans and stuff like that. I think it was a lot more self-interest reasons for it. But the Venezuelans are not happy, it seems, by and large, with Maduro by any means. This is from August last year, ladies and gentlemen, from Peter Sweden, who reported this on X at the time. I won't play it with the volume, but I'll play the actual clip for you now. You can see it's footage of a mass protest that was happening in Venezuela. And obviously protests against socialism, they kind of, don't really work, to be, to put it most charitably, don't really work, right? Because again, giving the state that level of enforcement, right, it's only ever really going to go one way. And protests, often without enforcement, again, what reason does the state have to care? But you'll see this coming on your screen now, ladies and gentlemen. This is an example of, and I've heavily cropped this video down, by the way. I want you to know I've quite heavily cropped this video down, so it'll fit in the section I have on screen. So the footage which you're watching now is actually filmed 9:16 vertical on a phone, it seems. There's a lot more vertical that you can see, so this is not the everything that you can see by any means, but you can see it's absolutely full. There's Venezuelan flags, right? This is one of what I can only really assume was many, many protests. You can see it zooming out. You can see how many people there are. To say that people were happy with Maduro and the regime that they were living under, and there's many reasons for that, I think would be very, very disingenuous if anybody was to claim that. And this is not unique to Venezuela either. This is not unique to Venezuela. This is another one of the protests which you see against socialism. And Peter, again, in this example, claims that this was also in support of Venezuela, I believe around the same time last year. This is from August 4th, when this was posted on X. This is a protest that took place in Spain. So you can see here the footage of how many people were protesting, in this case against socialism in Spain, but seemingly also voicing their support for Venezuela. Many people seeing themselves, with regards to socialism, with regards to their tyrannical leaders, seeing themselves in the same boat, right? We have a lot of things in common, not necessarily as people per se, but with similar government tyranny and cronyism as what was happening in Nepal when we covered that midway to, I think it was in the third quarter of last year. We were covering that when they literally overthrew their leaders. And that they set fire to the Nepalese parliament. So you can go back and find that episode where we talked about that if you want to know more about that. So it is absolutely, I think, the case that most Venezuelans, at least, are indeed happy about what has happened. This lady is one example again. I'll bring this up on screen for you now. She had some choice words for, in particular, people who are not from Venezuela, commenting on it, saying that it's not in their best interests or whatever. Now, obviously, she's one person, but I think based on what we've seen just now with the protests and everything, there's a lot of people whom this would resonate with.
If you are not from Venezuela, you better shut the fuck up. I've seen a lot of videos of gringos trying to explain Venezuela to Venezuelans. You don't even know the difference between Venezuela and Mexico. You can't even point a Venezuela in a fucking map. You don't know what is to live in starvation. You never saw a family member dying because you didn't have the medication, while the members of the Chavismo are walking with Rolex in their hand. Do you want to know how many people died trying to come to America, going through a jungle? Do you want to know how many women were raped there? We are 8 million of Venezuelans who have left Venezuela. You don't know what is to live like that. You are too freaking busy eating your Starbucks with almond milk, you motherfucker. I have a question for you guys. Where were you when they were killing us? Where were you when they were killing students who didn't have any weapon? You were too freaking busy drinking your Starbucks with oat milk. So you better shut the fuck up and take Venezuela out of your filthy mouth.
I can't fault a lot of what she was saying, to be honest. The gringo comment aside, because is everybody allowed to have an opinion on what is going on there? Yeah, absolutely. Of course we are. Just like you see people having their opinions on what's going on in the UK, people in the UK have their opinions on what's going on in the US. It's the job of the people that live in those nations to essentially either take on board what they're saying if they feel those people have something valuable to say, or disregard them and tell them, go off, mind your own business, watch out for your own country, right? Which is absolutely fair enough. I see what happens when, people comment on American politics, and then you watch like American political commentators, whether it's like your Matt Walsh or your Michael Knowles or all of these people, right? And they say, well, look, we really don't care. Worry about your own affairs. Mind your own business. He's absolutely right. And she has a point. She has a point, especially when she's saying a lot of these people in their hyper-privileged, often capitalist countries, right, where they don't realize how good they got it a lot of the time, will then go on about how heinous this is, what's going on in Venezuela, when a lot of the people who are living in Venezuela under the socialist dictatorship, no, we actually big fans of this, and shut up. You're actually ruining something good for us, at least, or that we perceive as good, just often to virtue signal. I see a lot of people, a lot of the prominent, hyper-rich, privileged left-wing, media figures like Ellen DeGeneres and people like that in America, that because Trump won, moved to the UK, but obviously they'll never go anywhere near the places where a lot of people in the UK have problems with, particularly with regards to immigration and all of this stuff. They'll never go anywhere near, the third world, whether it be, Indian or Bangladeshi or Somali enclaves, right? They'll use their millions and millions that they have to buy a nice little, either completely private property in some, overwhelmingly white, British, quiet countryside rural area that, you might think of as stereotypical destination where people would want to use as a holiday home as well. Or they will, what's the other thing I'm looking for? I lost my train of thought for a moment then. But they won't go into, they might go into central London if they called on to do a media appearance or something like that. Or they'll go in to do one of those little videos where it shows how good it is. And like, oh, nothing happened to me when I went into London. The fact that, in London, for example, is, as far as I know, still, I wouldn't imagine it's gotten even worse since the headline for the BBC was published last year. there was a rape reported every hour in London. A very, very depressing stat indeed. But a lot of these people, as she mentioned here, sipping on their oat lattes from Starbucks or whatever it is, telling people from Venezuela or telling the poor in Britain or whatever it is, how it actually is for them. You know, a little bit like as well how people perceive us foreigners, saying like, oh, look how we fit into your country, or let me tell you how your country is, and all of those things, right? And you can understand then why a lot of people get angry when it's done to Britain, right? And you can understand it why Venezuelans like this lady here are going to be angry in that regard as well. Even ones that often, or even ones that realize that Trump is likely not doing this for their benefit specifically, right? Whether it's for the oil or whether it's for whatever reason, and they say, we don't really care at this moment. This is the best day of my life. This is what this lady had to say, for example. I'm just going to assume that the translation is accurate, right? There's no way for me to verify it or anything like that. I'm going to assume the translation is accurate with the subtitles on screen. It's a lady saying, whether Trump is here for the oil or whatever, we don't care. This is a great day for us.
Mire, la transición va a ser difícil, sí, va a ser difícil. Trump no entró por interés y quiere el petróleo. No me importa, hoy es el peor día de mi puta vida. Dejen de...
And the last thing they said there, she said there before I cut the video off a little bit earlier, she said, stop fucking around, enjoy. That was the thing that she said. So, you can understand why, right? You can understand why, especially when you look at the grievances of people like this, for example. So this is another clip I'll bring up on screen now from, it's from Alerta Mundial, I hope I'm saying that right, or Alerta Mundo News, right, which I can only assume is a Venezuelan news station. It's a mother and a son burst into a left-wing demonstration in Puerto Rico. In this instance, the Post claims that they are Venezuelan, so whether they managed to flee or whether they emigrated or whatever from Venezuela. There was a demonstration going on in Puerto Rico in defense of Nicolas Maduro, and the mother and the son, before they were arrested, I believe, by the security forces there. So that, this would be a Puerto Rican news station, then Noticentro or the Alerta Mundial on X. They claimed or they said that among the pro-Maduro demonstrators, there wasn't a single Venezuelan, and I've actually got Gwar to try and translate as best as possible just to make sure that I am able to relay it to you guys, because there's no actual subtitles on this clip. So here's that clip for you, ladies and gentlemen, of this mother and son who were shortly after breaking up or breaking into this gathering of left-wingers, pro-Maduro left-wingers, what they had to say before they were carted off by what seemed to be security forces.
¿Qué le pasó? ¿Están aquí? ¿Qué pasó? 26 años. 26 años llevamos esperando ese momento. Ustedes vieron los que dicen llamar la paz. No, asesinos ustedes. Te nombro 4.
Papi, quiero dejar algo claro. Aquí no hay ni un venezolano. Aquí ni un venezolano, porque realmente yo no sé si a alguien aquí le falta un plato de comida, si alguien aquí ha tenido que ir a un hospital y que le falta insumos. Pero esos venezolanos de mentira, porque ni son venezolanos. El venezolano de verdad. Venezuela ya expresó su voluntad. Venezuela, 70% de Venezuela quiere que Venezuela sea libre. Venezuela tiene que ser libre de Maduro. No hace sentido defender un criminal de guerra.
So, to play this for you now, ladies and gentlemen, you just saw the clip. Gwar bringing sort of like the broken bits of dialogue that it could get from all of the background disruption together. Basically, is conveying what these people were saying. The mother bursting into the shot, shouting, what happened to him, what happened here. 26 years. 26 years we've been waiting for this moment. You saw those who claimed to call for peace. No, murderers you, and seemingly gesturing at the left-wingers. The son then came forward, as you saw in the clip. And what he seems to be saying is, calm down, I want to make something clear. There isn't a single Venezuelan here, not one. I don't know if anyone here is missing a plate of food or has to go to the hospital and lack supplies, but those quote-unquote Venezuelans are a lie because they're not even Venezuelans. The real Venezuelan truth is that Venezuela has already expressed its will, pardon me, 70% of Venezuela wants Venezuela to be free. Venezuela has to be free from Maduro. It makes no sense to defend him. So again, you're seeing here a great example of what the lady, right, from before, calling people gringos and so whatever else, the exact kind of things which they are sick and tired of, right? And a lot of these sentiments as well, when you see foreigners and whatever, when you see like foreign left-wingers or whatever championing the destruction of Britain and downplaying rape gangs or downplaying the colonization, downplaying the ethnic replacement, all of these things, right? People get equally frustrated. People get equally frustrated and angry because of how close, in particular, in Britain, in England in particular, people are close, the native people are close to minoritization and, well, subsequent elimination from that. It is a very, very dangerous time. It is a very, very dangerous time. But a lot of these, for the sake of their narrative, they want to downplay those things. And then they do so from their ivory towers, from their metaphorical ivory towers, right? Or figurative ivory towers. So, yeah, you can understand why people get a lot of sick and tired about this. Venezuelans, no exception. They have pride in their nation and pride for themselves like any other people do and should, right? And in their own country, when it's their government that are persecuting them, you can understand why they wouldn't appreciate this kind of sentiment, especially from places where, again, San Juan, Puerto Rico, not exactly a bastion of prosperity by any means. But you can understand that then why people campaigning for more of what they perceive as their destruction is going to really irk them, especially when you're not even Venezuelan, right? And you're not even in Venezuela. And a lot of the time it's because you don't actually know what's going on there. So you can understand that. So to say that, again, a lot of this stuff that's going on is because just Trump's self-interest or whatever, or that he's not doing it in the best interest of Venezuelans, I think you can make those cases. But to say that Venezuelans aren't happy about this, I think would be disingenuous, to say the least, as well. Because I look at this, ladies and gentlemen, this is the kind of stuff, one thing that you'd be dealing with. You mentioned there about lack of resources, you have to go to hospital, lack of supplies, all of this stuff. I know the lefties hate it when on most things you look at per capita, so GDP per capita and stuff like that, right? It's based on current US dollars, I believe. But if you compare Venezuela with the world, for example, you get things that look like this. You get graphs that look like this. And this is a time, again, across all of these times here, this is a time when Nicolas Maduro's going out to Salt Bay's restaurant and spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on cigars and all of this stuff. He's a fat frigging pig, right? And I know I'm not exactly the bastion of leanness at the moment, but Jesus Christ, man. So you always see in these socialist dictatorships, the most part, right? You see Kim Jong-un, right? He's basically spherical. He's basically spherical and his people are starving. And you see here in this graph that Venezuela, in terms of GDP per capita, the world is at about 13,631.2 dollars, so that's per capita. Venezuela is all the way down here at 4,217, and it is rising. The one that you can say it is rising, but look where it was back in sort of 2000 to 2010. It was one of the richest, it rivaled on the world where it is now. It was actually doing better. It was actually doing better then. And seemingly, I think, am I right in saying, maybe you can comment down below, or maybe you can comment in the live chat. I'll just have a quick look up when I tab off this in a moment. That was right around the time that Hugo Chavez came in, if I'm not mistaken. You can understand then why the Venezuelans would not exactly be hostile to American intervention, whether you perceive it as a good thing or not, if you're looking at it from the outside anywhere else, right? It certainly seems to be a little bit incongruous with what Trump has said with like no new conflicts and stuff like this, right? Granted, it's not necessarily been a grander scale war, but we have no idea how many of the other leaders across the world are going to respond. We have no idea. I can only hope that it is going to pan out in a positive way and that it will show that Trump at least has some modicum knowledge of what he's doing. There was a very similar thing. Remember, people were saying that when the military went into Iran and bombed the nuclear facilities there, that this was going to be the ignition of a hot war, right? This is essentially going to be World War III that was going to come. It was a false flag, all of this stuff. And all of these things, especially when Israel's involved in all of this stuff. And it does seem that, anyway, that potentially there's some, involvement here as well, which we'll get into in a little bit, that, people want to heighten those claims and say that it's going to be, now it's going to be World War III, now it's going to be World War III, and who knows, behind closed doors, maybe that is the ultimate goal. Maybe the ultimate goal is obviously to drag the United States and by extension all the rest of us into a hot war of regime change in Iran at some point, or whatever else, right? I hope that's not the case, but we don't know what the minds behind all this are really thinking. And to say that we do know, I think would be, a bit presumptuous. So, speaking of Iran, around this time as well, which is quite interesting, because a lot of people as well, whenever these things happen, like whether it's Trump now going into Venezuela, or when people were saying there was going to be regime change in Iran now and that Trump should even be impeached over it and all of that, right? Even though none of those rumors really bore any fruit or anything like that in the end. This did happen in Iran recently, though, which was very interesting to see. According to this post on X from War Surveillance, the Iranian people have been seizing and setting fire to several Revolutionary Guard bases as well. So you'll see this clip coming on screen now, ladies and gentlemen. This is from Iran. I'll play it without the sound, but this is Iranian citizens who, I don't know whether it's because of what they've seen in Venezuela or whatever, have seemingly taken over a lot of the IRGC or some of the IRGC infrastructure in what appears to, well, not necessarily what appears to be, what clearly is some kind of violent takeover. And it just goes to show that, especially with us in the Western world, we are dissatisfied with our governments and stuff like that. And I can understand then when people bemoan us getting involved in foreign conflicts with how many problems we've got at home. Completely agree. I completely agree. But then a lot of people then will, in one breath, then say that, but then seemingly hint that the people actually like these regimes in these regions, right, with Iran and things like that, and downplaying a lot of the influence of like Qatar and stuff like that, while then going on about Israel, and then also doing the same in reverse, right? Some people will highlight Qatar, and then not want to talk about the allegations of Israeli influence, Israeli foreign influence and stuff like that, for example. So again, you have partisans on both sides, basically. And that's why I think you should always try to take the step back, the necessary step back. I talk about this in Wrong Speak as well. Like, you don't want to get trapped in this, you don't want to get lost in the weeds, so to speak. You want to still be able to step back and see things from that bigger perspective, almost like that bird's eye perspective, right? Keep zooming out. There's probably more that you're missing, or at the very least, just make sure that you're not missing something critical, right? Which is why I think we should be obviously skeptical of all foreign intervention, which is why when I see a lot of quote unquote like conservative influencers and politicians and whatever else basically going out and doing a propaganda tour for Qatar, right? For Qatar, or in Doha, whatever the capital of the place is, right? And then you have others then that will go out and seemingly do the same thing in areas like Israel and stuff like that, where it's clearly done as part of government behest, right? It's not like they've done a private trip because they want to go see the Holy Land and go see the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and they're doing it as part of a private faith, like a journey or something like that, right? It's quite clear in many instances to try and curry favor with the foreign government. It plays into the allegations. Again, every politician's been bought off by these foreign nations. And when you see all of these examples, how many examples do you have to see before your defenses, if you want to call it that, right? Or eventually you just can't pull the wool over your eyes anymore. You want to keep believing that your politicians are doing the best for you, right? But you keep seeing all these examples, and we know clearly now that our politicians are not doing the best for us, and they have no intention of doing that anyway, right? But you want to keep believing that, these people have your best interests at heart or whatever, or that your elected representatives are doing so because for you, but then they go and do all of these things, and your conservative influencers, you want to believe that they're being truthful for you. And then they go, whether it's to, people getting accused of being paid by the Israeli government for social media posts, and then you have people going and doing propaganda tours to Qatar as well. It's like, can we just have actual people that care about their home and their people? Is that so much to ask for? Yeah, just to show a lot of these people whom you'll go to, right, to get your information and whatever else, people you might think are reputable sources or have a a decent amount of popularity and following behind them, they seemingly can be. I'm not making allegations as to who has received what, but to say that they can't be bought, it certainly doesn't seem that way. Anyway, this was a particularly weird take, though, on this whole thing. This was a particularly weird take, in my opinion, from Tucker Carlson, who has gone on with the distinct possibility that I mentioned before. There's plenty of reasons why the US might want to do this in Venezuela before what Tucker Carlson said. You've got oil, you've got Tren de Aragua, you've got, you could say stability in the region and stuff like that. You could maybe even stretch it, really, really stretch it if you want, and say that Trump felt sorry for the Venezuelan people or whatever. Again, I think that's a massive stretch, right? But to say that it would have been to promote gay marriage in Venezuela would not have crossed my radar. That would not have crossed my radar. I could be wrong, but this from Tucker Carlson would not have been something that would ever have crossed my radar. But maybe you guys can leave your take in the comments. Do you think that he has a point here?
We can safely discount democracy as a reason for affecting regime change in Venezuela. We're not going to go kill Nicolas Maduro because we don't like the way he's treating his people. It's possible we're mad that he doesn't allow gay marriage. That is a distinct possibility, but no one will say that out loud. Not defending the regime, just saying. One of the most conservative countries in North or South or Central America. Only El Salvador really comes close, which is much smaller, of course. And by the way, the U.S.-backed opposition leader who would take Maduro's place if he were taken out is, of course, pretty eager to get gay marriage in Venezuela. So to those of you who thought this whole project was globo homo, not crazy, actually.
Why are we?
I don't know. From what I've seen, it doesn't appear that the lady he's referencing, I can't remember how to pronounce her name off the top of my head. I don't have it to hand either. I have seen that according to Trump, I think he's made a statement saying that she's not in contention to replace Maduro. So I'm not sure if that claim is very substantiated. But there's certainly some things to be said about this. Trying to say that Maduro, socially conservative as he may be, or as Tucker may claim him to be in this instance, that's the reason that Trump or the Americans want to go in and seemingly affect a regime change in Venezuela. I even think the accusations potentially of Israeli involvement are stronger than that. Trump being one of the biggest people in this instance to seemingly have changed even the social fabric in America to be one that is much more conservative than it has been that I've seen in recent memory. The executive orders in opposition to all of the trans stuff, right? He was the one that obviously overturned Roe v. Wade, which was one of the biggest liberal policies that made it a federal mandate, I believe it was, or a federal issue with regards to abortion, that there was no states' rights with regards to the issue. That was what Roe v. Wade was. And he overturned it to the big chagrin of a lot of the leftists and the Democrats and so on. So yeah, I think there's certainly a lot more credible routes you could go down. The one thing I believe the lady that he's referring to said is that if she was to be installed, one of the first things that she would do is move the embassy to Jerusalem, which again is like, why is that one of the first things on your lips when your leader, right, your dictator has just been ousted? Why is that the first thing, or one of the first things on your mind when it comes to this issue? Does lead into a lot of the allegations potentially of Israeli involvement behind the scenes, which I think is important to look at as well. Here's that clip, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. I'll just bring it up on screen for you now. The socially conservative leader of Venezuela who jetted out to Salt Bay's restaurant and is smoking, I believe, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of cigars, which I'll bring that up on screen, while his people suffer and in many instances literally starve, mind you. Here's at the very least we can say that, oh, well, Nicolas Maduro, at least he's socially conservative, right? So if I just bring this up on screen for you, just realigning it. So here we go. Here is that clip. Again, he's jetted out to Salt Bay's restaurant whilst his people are starving, and he's got a big, what seems to be Cuban cigar in his mouth. And apparently over the course of his trip there, when these videos were taken, it amounted to, I think, the claim that I've seen is about 400,000 in cigars alone. Yeah. But global homo. That's the main thing. Now again, people who are speculating potentially Israeli involvement, could very well be. Seemingly, because this is going to play into wider plans to weaken Iran. We will see what comes of this, but it's important to note here, again, is there more than meets the eye? Is there more than meets the eye? I suppose just the phrase that I was looking for. I was going to say, are there more than meets the eye? But are there more things to consider, I guess? Which odds are there are. There's so many things which we've covered already. The GDP, the crushing socialism, the fact that protests have been brewing for a long, long time, right? And it's spanned multiple countries, right? Whatever the reason is, Tren de Aragua, how this, again, fits into every other conflict that's going on around the world at the moment, or every other geopolitical struggle, etc. There's so many things to consider. This is not happening in a vacuum, and that's why it is important to look at things like this as well.
We've had an unbelievable success, and by degrading Iran, which was a first-rate power, now it's a second-rate or third-rate power. They were throwing their weight all over the place, exporting terrorism, not only to every part of the Middle East, but to Venezuela. They're in cahoots with the Maduro regime, They're exporting terrorism to America, to the American hemisphere, and then they want these Hezbollah and Hamas to get their guys into the United States. So Hamas and Iran's and its proxies are a threat not only to us, but to Israel, all America's allies in the Middle East, and to America itself. We've had an unbelievable success, and by
to go with this clip, in the comments, they seem to be on Fox News. I'm not sure who this person is. Apparently it's General Jack Keane. Seemed to have a Freudian slip. And say that what's going on in Venezuela seemed to be very good for the Israeli people, but then very quickly corrected himself when he realized this and said that it was going to be the Venezuelan people. The clip is just struggling to load a minute, ladies and gentlemen. I'm just going to pause the recording. Okay, here's the clip. Might be a bit difficult to hear. The volume is a little bit quiet because it's somebody recording this from their living room, right? But hopefully the audio, improvements that will happen later on before this episode goes out will help take care of it. Here's that what very much seems to be a Freudian slip.
Are really great for the Venezuelan people. 27 the implications.
Did you hear that?
Are really great for the Venezuelan people. 27 the implications here are really great for the Venezuelan people. 27.
The implications here are really great for the Israel, and then he goes for the Venezuelan people. So again, feeds into a lot of people's ideas as to what's really going on behind the scenes, right? Now, I'm not going to really feed into like the claims of I really think that Donald Trump is, 100%, owned or controlled by the Israelis, as many people do. The person who runs this account, I've seen shared things like that. Vehemently pro-Palestine, right, account. So take that into account as well, obviously. But, what matters is, in this instance, what's coming from the world leaders' mouths, and whether this person is sharing it for purely political reasons in their own mind or whatever. Kind of why I'm sharing it as well, I suppose, but trying to dig down into what's really going on and trying to get people to really try and scrutinize as many different reasons as possible. I think that's possibly the most important thing to do. It's very easy to just go to the dogma, right? Or a lot of people's dogmas. Sometimes it's just good to try and take that step back and just have a look at the whole picture. Looking at Venezuela's economy, the socialism, the cracking down on freedom of speech and all of these things, even how Nathan Livingston, the person who shared the clip of Tucker Carlson's show, which I just played a little bit ago, also put in the comments how Tucker Carlson's views have changed since 2017, for example. I'll just quickly read it for you. In 2017, Tucker, when he was on Fox News, said that faced with demands that he relinquish power and hold free elections, President Maduro has decided to unleash armed supporters. Their guns weren't taken away on his disarmed populace. On Monday, Maduro announced his plans to expand the country's civil militia from 100K to 500K. Every member gets a gun. The intent is clear. If he and his cronies can't stay in power forever, they will do so with the force of arms, and the masses who have no guns don't stand a chance. And then, obviously, in 2025... and then he says Maduro, whatever his many faults, has the most socially conservative country possibly in the hemisphere. Venezuela has banned pornography, banned abortion, banned gay marriage, banned sex changes, banned usury. See, not necessarily bad things that they've gotten rid of, right? Especially abortion. The sex changes, the usury. People obviously make a tremendous case for banning pornography and gay marriage as well, right? People have various reasons why it should be banned at a government level. You don't have credit cards with 40% interest in Venezuela. Personally become poorer to end abortion. Voluntarily become poorer to end abortion in the United States. Now, that seems to me as though it's a false dilemma. That seems to me as though he's putting on this weird false dilemma, if this statement from Tucker is correct, because you can end abortion without becoming poorer, right? Purely at the government who makes those decrees, right? You don't need to do anything with yourself economically and then say that, maybe we should adopt a Venezuelan socialist-like system if to get rid of abortion. Britain, is increasingly becoming more and more of a socialist country, and we've just expanded abortion all the way up until birth. Right, so it nothing to do with socialism in this instance that's going to ban abortion. Just seems to be that Maduro seems to be vehemently against these things for whatever reason, vehemently against these things when a lot of his lefty supporters will be vehemently pro them, which again just shows how completely, incongruous the woke lefty position is. They don't even understand the basics of what's going on. But that doesn't then... all of these other things, the other reality behind the socialist dystopian government that's taken over Venezuela is what the people who are subject to that regime are saying. It does appear in most instances that they are overwhelmingly happy with this, and it's weird then that the Western cheerleaders in this instance will go down these weird routes of trying to seemingly to try and denigrate the efforts of their own president and their own leaders, which is really, really weird. Makes sense when it comes to like Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron and these disgusting commie leaders that have betrayed their people, right? It does seem that Donald Trump is trying to do at least good for the American people, certainly a lot better than anything the Democrats would have done, who would have just continued the managed decline of America. And that would have emboldened the other countries whom they said this action would have emboldened, like China, Russia, and the BRICS coalition. So weak America in this instance, who is really the only real opposition to those, right? Because Europe hasn't got its affairs in order. We haven't got our affairs in order. We're a laughing stock. We're a joke, right? NATO is propped up pretty much by America, by some of the other countries that actually meet their NATO spending. Most of them don't. But yet they still have all of this other money they set aside for their social programs and all the rest of it. I think Montgomery Toms put out a pretty decent take on the issue when he was walking through what appears to be his town centre or whatever. Basically, stop going on about Venezuela and put Britain first. I think that's where the situation needs to be. Again, Britain, Britain, Britain. British people worrying British issues in Britain. All of these other things are just noise. Now, when it pertains to Britain, yeah, we do want to take notice, right? But otherwise, we need to focus. We have so many domestic problems, so many problems on home soil, that we need to focus on those first. Here's what he said on the topic.
It's incredible how much people are obsessing about Venezuela. Look, there may be a discussion there and a debate, fine. But when you're obsessing about it to the point of forgetting about your own country, which is England or Britain in general, that's when there's an issue. We've got digital IDs on the horizon. We've had vaccines be rolled out, or vaccines, mRNA COVID shots, which have had no accountability, which have hurt people. We've had lockdowns that have had no accountability. We've got net zero wrecking our nation. We've got ULEZ in London. We've got so many problems. Just look around. Britain is dying. And yeah, X, Instagram, all the social media platforms, people are obsessing about Trump invading Venezuela. It's just madness to me. When are people going to prioritize Britain, prioritize their own nation, rather than going on about what could be in our country, rather than acting and actually making it a better place? It's incredibly frustrating. It's incredible how much.
Yep. Now, I had to reset my interface throughout part of that because it decided that it wasn't going to play the actual audio for the clip. But yeah, it's talking about digital ID, talking about all manner of the political issues we need to be focusing on at home. Digital ID being one of the premier ones we need to be focusing on at the moment. And I've spent now, nearly an hour? Yeah, 50 minutes or so talking about the foreign issue, that, the Venezuelan issue, only because it's such a big thing that people are talking about at the moment. I feel it needs to have a wide net cast on it, or a wide eye cast on it, so you're not leaving anything to dogma unnecessarily, so to speak. Bear with me 2 seconds, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, we're just going to make sure the door's shut because the washing machine's going in the other room, so just didn't want that coming up over the microphone. But yeah, the decline of everything, the decline of the NHS, the demographic changes, all of the other things that come along with it, the cultural changes, the colonization, the massively declining birth rate in Britain that's still plummeting and going down, right? Then all that, comes into the notion that the British people are being replaced, right? Partially doing it themselves by eliminating themselves from the gene pool. Partially it's because the government are mass importing their replacements, right? And we need to be focused on those above anything else. So wait to see what more comes out of this. But it is kind of funny that the Duffer Brothers scene where they had the character, come out, and that being the source of all his superpowers, basically. That he had his superpowers because he was gay. And that scene, nearly 7 minutes, took longer than Delta Force to extract a dictatorship leader from Venezuela. That will never not be funny. That is the really strange thing. One thing that is also quite strange, ladies and gentlemen, now I've just had a chance to fact check myself in real time, because it was claimed initially by Mario Naufal, or Naufal, however you say it, that shots had been fired at President or Vice President J.D. Vance's Ohio home. So the one thing is, though, it does appear, based on this image, that there very well could have been shots that were fired. So this is the image of the windows, which are at J.D. Vance's home, his Cincinnati home. Just bring them up on screen for you. So here's the window of the residence with what appears to be 4 bullet holes in them. This was the initial claim. However, other articles that have come out since then, like the Fox 19 one, which I'll read for you in a moment, don't make any mention of bullets that have been fired. So it does appear that there was obviously an act of vandalism that took place, but whether they were shots fired at J.D. Vance's home, like that was claimed, is still not been confirmed. But one suspect has indeed been arrested. It's unclear whether this is in reference or in relation to what happened in Venezuela, as we were just discussing, some radical leftist or whatever. But it's a man known as William Defoor, D-E-F-O-O-R, 26 years old, is being charged with 1 count each of obstructing official business, criminal damaging or endangering, and criminal trespass and vandalism. So 1 count of each at Vance's East Walnut Hills house. U.S. Secret Service called for Cincinnati police at 12:15 a.m. after seeing someone running eastbound, a dispatcher told Fox 19. According to the arrest report, Defoor was seen by a U.S. Secret Service agent walking onto Vance's property and damaging 4 of the victim's residential windows and the victim's vehicle. Defoor was detained by Secret Service agents shortly thereafter. The vice president and his family were out of town and not at home when the incident occurred. Thank God, obviously, because if it does turn out that there were shots fired at his home, as Mario Naufel claimed, but it doesn't appear that the articles at this moment in time are actually backing that claim up, then it's a very good thing, obviously, that he was out of town. Obviously, there's no guessing the amount of people out there that because of bipartisan politics, just because they hate J.D. Vance and would want to hurt him in any way possible, that there's no telling what some people out there, some deranged lunatics, want to do to his wife and do to his family and obviously do to him. So it's good that he wasn't at home when this happened, but just goes to show that these incidents, ladies and gentlemen, of targeting conservative or right-wing political figures, what seem to be, in a pattern. I'm not going to jump to conclusions on what the political affiliation would be. Could be somebody, for all we know, there's a mega right-winger that thinks that J.D. Vance is a hardcore leftist because he's not right-wing enough. We do not know. So it's just a really, really scary time in politics at the moment. But that doesn't mean that we get to shy away from it. Doesn't mean we get to shy away from these political issues and whatever else, whatever the threats may be, especially with the authoritarians we have in power at the moment. That's exactly what they want. They want silent compliance. It's the way they're going to get through digital ID because people will just sleepwalk into it. It's the way they're going to get all of these things through, ladies and gentlemen, is by us sleepwalking into it and not seeing it. Well, seemingly not seeing it coming, but would have had myriad opportunities to change course. So, don't go with the silent compliance. And understand there is going to be risk, but ultimately it's going to be the people that stand up for something that are going to be remembered. They'll always just be remembered as a figure of your time, as we're seeing now with, your reputation might try to be tarnished by, for example, radical leftists for a while, like with statues and whatever else. You will ultimately be judged as a figure of your time. So the times we live in now are very, very scary ones indeed, especially if you're a British person living in Britain, because Britain's on its last legs. And we either radically change course now, or it's going to continue on to extinction. That's a terrifying prospect. If you enjoyed that clip, then make sure to go on over to the Voice of the Valley's X page at VOT_Valleys on X. We're also on Instagram at Voice of the Valleys. Make sure to like, share, subscribe, comment, all of that good stuff. Thank you so much, and we'll see you again soon. Godspeed.